A nation watches as Judge Caprio treats a homeless Vietnam veteran like a human being. The words feel heavier than the air inside the courtroom, not because they are poetic, but because they sound like something that should never need to be said out loud. And yet, here we are, a full room, cameras rolling, people watching from home, waiting to see whether a man standing alone at the center of the room will be treated like a problem or like a person. The police officer speaks first. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't sound angry. That's what makes it worse. Repeat subject, he says casually, like he's reading a weather report. Not a name, not a story, just a label, a shortcut, something that ends conversation before it begins. No one corrects him. The man stands still as the words land. He doesn't react. Not because he doesn't hear them, but because he's heard them before. Too many times, in too many places. On sidewalks, in shelters, in offices where the chairs are soft but the eyes are hard. The file is read next. Its language is clean, efficient, almost impressive in how quickly it reduces a life. No occupation, no address, no social contribution. It sounds final, like a conclusion rather than a description, as if these 3 lines are enough to explain everything about the man standing there. No mention of age, no mention of history, no mention of how someone ends up with nothing without starting that way. Just absence, written neatly, officially. He is asked to stand a little to the side, not because he did anything at that moment, just procedure, they say. But procedures have meanings too. Separation equals control. Distance equals safety, or at least the illusion of it. The man moves where he's told, slowly, carefully, as if he's afraid that one wrong step might confirm what everyone already seems to believe about him. From the gallery, a whisper slips through the room. It's not loud. It doesn't need to be. Why hasn't he been taken away yet? No one turns around to look at who said it. No one challenges it. The whisper doesn't echo because it doesn't have to. It already belongs there. The man doesn't look up. He keeps his eyes fixed somewhere between the floor and nothing at all. That place people learn to stare at when eye contact only brings trouble. When looking up feels like inviting judgment, or worse, disappointment. Cameras capture everything. The slight hunch in his shoulders, the worn jacket that doesn't quite fit anymore, the way his hands stay close to his body as if he's trying to make himself smaller, less noticeable, easier to ignore. This isn't just a trial, it's a performance. Everyone knows their role. The officer, the prosecutor, the clerks, even the audience. They've seen this scene before. Different man, same posture, same outcome usually. The only person who hasn't spoken yet is Judge Frank Caprio. He sits quietly, no tapping of the gavel, no interruption, no immediate authority asserted, just watching. At first, it's easy to mistake his silence for distance or indifference. But then you notice his eyes. They move from the file to the man to the officer, from the officer to the gallery, slowly, intentionally, like he's assembling something in his mind that the paperwork forgot to include. Something doesn't sit right, and everyone can feel it, even if they can't name it yet. The courtroom itself seems to pause, as if it knows this moment matters more than most, as if it understands that before guilt or innocence is decided, something far more basic is being negotiated. Who deserves patience? Who deserves dignity? Who deserves to be seen? The man shifts his weight slightly, not from guilt, from exhaustion. The kind that comes from standing in places like this too many times, hoping maybe this one will be different, while already knowing it probably won't be. He has learned how to survive rooms like this. Keep answers short. Don't argue. Don't explain unless asked. And even then, only a little. Too much truth can sound like an excuse. Too much emotion can sound like guilt. The system rewards silence, so he stays silent. Judge Caprio finally leans forward just a little. Not enough to draw attention, not enough to break formality, but enough that the people closest to the bench notice. Still no words. And that restraint matters, because in most courtrooms, the first words spoken decide everything that follows. They set the temperature. They tell everyone whether the day will move fast or slow, whether the person standing there is worth time or not. Caprio doesn't rush. He looks at the file again, then at the man. And for a brief moment, one the cameras almost miss, his expression changes. Not pity, not sympathy, something quieter, recognition. Not of who the man is, but of what's happening to him. This is the part no one writes down. The moment before judgment, the space where a decision could still go either way. The room waits. Outside this courtroom, thousands of people are watching, some casually, some while folding laundry, some half listening, others leaning closer to their screens, not knowing why their chest feels tight. They think they're watching a legal process. What they're really watching is a question unfold. Is this man a problem to be managed or a human being to be understood? Nothing has been decided yet. No verdict, no ruling, no dramatic turn, but something important has already happened. The first injustice has already appeared. Not in a sentence, not in a punishment, but in the assumptions made before the man ever opened his mouth. And whether this courtroom corrects that injustice or reinforces it will define everything that comes next. Judge Caprio finally lifts his gaze fully, straight ahead, not at the file, not at the cameras, at the man. And in that moment, before a single word is spoken, the room understands. This case may not be about the law at all. The prosecutor finally speaks, not loudly, not harshly, just firm enough to sound reasonable. That's how it usually begins. Do you realize how disruptive your behavior is? The question floats in the air for a moment before it lands. It's framed like a lesson, like something a parent might say to a child who should already know better. The word disruptive hangs there, heavy with implication. Not dangerous, not criminal, just inconvenient, out of place, something that interrupts the normal flow of things. The man lifts his head slightly, just enough to answer. I was just looking for somewhere to sleep. His voice is quiet, not shaky, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from repeating the same explanation too many times, knowing it rarely changes anything. He doesn't add details, doesn't talk about the cold or the nights when the noise never stops, or how lying down somewhere safe can feel like winning a small, private battle. He offers only the truth, trimmed down to its simplest form. Before it can settle, it's cut off. Yes or no, 2 words, sharp, clean, efficient. They slice through the explanation like it never mattered in the first place. Like context is something optional, like reasons are luxuries for people who already belong. The man stops speaking. He nods slightly, then freezes, unsure which answer is expected now. His mouth opens, then closes again. He's trying to adjust, to fit the shape of the question, to be cooperative, to not make things worse. He looks down. His hand moves slowly toward his pocket. It trembles, not dramatically, just enough to notice, enough to reveal nerves that have nowhere to go. Fingers fumble against fabric worn thin by time and weather. The pocket resists slightly, like it doesn't want to give up what it's holding. When he finally pulls his hand out, what he places on the table doesn't look impressive. Torn papers, old military records, creased so many times they barely hold together anymore. The ink is faded in places. Names blur into dates. Dates blur into something that might once have been official, once. He smooths the papers carefully, almost apologetically, like he knows how they look. Like he knows they don't meet the standard of this room. They don't shine. They don't come from a printer. They smell faintly of the street, of damp cardboard, of places where important things aren't supposed to be kept. A court official leans forward, glances at them briefly, then shakes their head. We can't verify this. The words aren't cruel. That's the part that hurts the most. They're neutral, procedural. As if what's being dismissed isn't a person's history, but a receipt missing a date. Someone else adds almost reflexively, then it doesn't count. No one raises their voice. No one slams a hand on the table. No one insults him directly. And yet, something is taken away. Not the papers, the meaning behind them. No one says the word erased, but everyone in the room feels it happen. You can sense it in the way the air shifts, in the way the man's shoulders drop just a little more, in the way his fingers hesitate before gathering the papers back up, unsure if they're even worth holding on to anymore. Those papers were more than evidence. They were proof, not just of service, but of existence, of having once been part of something larger, of mattering to someone, somewhere, at some point. Now they are just scraps. He folds them carefully anyway, slowly, as if respect might still be possible, even if recognition is not. The prosecutor moves on. The system keeps going. That's what it does best. The room grows colder, not in temperature. No one adjusts the thermostat. No breath fogs the air. It's colder in a way that has nothing to do with weather. It's the kind of cold that creeps in when empathy leaves, when everything becomes about efficiency, when the goal quietly shifts from understanding to resolution. The man is no longer being listened to. He's being processed. He stands there, smaller now somehow, even though he hasn't moved. The space between him and everyone else feels wider, more fixed, like a gap that's been reinforced by policy and habit and time. No one asks how long he's been carrying those papers. No one asks how many times he's shown them before. No one asks what it feels like to watch the last physical proof of your past be dismissed with a shake of the head. Because those questions aren't required. They're not part of the system. And that's the lesson forming quietly in the background, even if no one says it out loud. Systems don't have to be cruel. They just have to stop caring. Indifference is efficient. It saves time. It avoids emotion. It allows people to do their jobs without discomfort. It hides behind rules and procedures and phrases like unable to verify. No one in this room believes they're doing something wrong. That's the most unsettling part. The man shifts his weight again. His eyes stay low. He has learned this posture over years. The posture of someone who knows better than to hope too much. Who knows that explaining yourself can sometimes make things worse. That insisting on your own worth can be seen as defiance. So he waits. Judge Caprio has not interrupted. Not yet. He's watching. Closely. He's seen moments like this before. The way dignity can be dismantled without anyone ever intending to do harm. The way a life can be reduced to what fits on a form. The prosecutor continues, speaking of disruptions, of prior encounters, of public inconvenience. Words stack neatly on top of each other, forming a narrative that sounds complete if you don't look too closely. From the gallery, faces remain still. Some look uncomfortable. Others look bored. A few nod along, already convinced this is just another case. The cameras capture the official version of events. They don't capture what's missing. They don't capture the feeling in the room, the subtle sense that something human is slipping through the cracks. The man's hands are empty now. The papers are gone, tucked back into his pocket, where they will remain unseen and unacknowledged. For a moment, it's as if he never had them at all. That's how erasure works. Quietly, efficiently, without ceremony. Judge Caprio finally leans back slightly. His face gives nothing away, but his attention hasn't drifted. If anything, it's sharper now. He has seen how easily dignity can be stripped away, not by force, but by neglect. And he knows something important. Before this case can be decided, before guilt or innocence can even be discussed, something else has to be addressed. Because once dignity is gone, justice becomes almost impossible. And everyone in the room, whether they realize it or not, is about to find out whether this courtroom is willing to notice that loss or pretend it never happened. The prosecutor clears their throat and continues. There is no anger in their voice, no personal edge. What comes next sounds almost responsible, reasonable, the kind of thing people say when they believe they are protecting order. They request a harsher sentence to prevent repeat offenses. The phrase lands smoothly, like it has been practiced many times before. Prevent repeat offenses. It sounds proactive, protective, as if the goal is safety, not punishment. No one interrupts. No one asks what kind of prevention actually works. No one asks whether punishment has ever solved the problem it claims to address. The man listens quietly. His eyes remain low. He doesn't argue. He doesn't plead. He doesn't ask for mercy. He has learned that asking can sometimes make people turn away faster. No one asks about his mental health. Not one question about sleep deprivation, about anxiety, about fear, about what happens to a person who lives without safety long enough that their body forgets what calm feels like. No one asks if he has nightmares. No one asks why he flinches slightly at sudden sounds. No one asks whether he has ever been evaluated, treated, supported, because those questions slow things down. And right now the room wants to move forward. No one mentions trauma. That word stays locked somewhere outside the courtroom, like it's too complicated to bring inside. Trauma opens doors people don't want to walk through. It demands context. It asks uncomfortable follow-up questions. It challenges the clean story the system prefers, the story where behavior exists in isolation, detached from cause. The prosecutor continues outlining prior incidents, encounters, dates, locations. Each one is framed as a choice, a failure, a repetition, a pattern. The man's past is being assembled into something that looks deliberate, even though no one has asked what drives it. Then someone says it, plainly, without emotion. The war was a long time ago. The sentence is delivered as a fact, and it is one. But facts can still wound. The words land harder than any accusation so far, harder than repeat subject, harder than disruptive behavior. Because this sentence doesn't just dismiss his actions, it dismisses his experience. It suggests expiration, as if pain has a timeline, as if suffering has a shelf life, as if the calendar itself should have healed him by now. The man's jaw tightens slightly, just for a moment, then relaxes again. He doesn't respond. There is nothing to say that wouldn't sound like an excuse in this room. When Vietnam is mentioned again, a clerk looks away. It's subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it happens. Eyes drop to paperwork, a pen moves. Something suddenly becomes more interesting than the word hanging in the air. Vietnam, not just a place, a memory, a wound, a chapter many would rather keep closed. The discomfort spreads quietly. The room doesn't want to sit with it. The past feels heavy, complicated, easier to acknowledge from a distance in textbooks or ceremonies. Not here, not now, not when it complicates a legal process. Compassion begins to feel inconvenient. It slows the schedule. It muddies the narrative. It asks people to care beyond their assigned roles. And caring is risky. If you care, you might have to explain why the system failed someone. If you care, you might have to admit that the problem didn't start with this man. Judge Caprio notices the shift. He's been on the bench long enough to recognize it. The subtle lean forward from the prosecution, the tightening of language, the quiet expectation that this case should wrap up neatly. There is pressure in the room now. Not aggressive, but firm. The kind of pressure that encourages conformity, that rewards decisiveness over reflection. The unspoken message is clear. Move on. Stay firm. Don't complicate things. A softer ruling would look weak, they think. Weak in front of the cameras. Weak in front of the public. Weak in front of a system that values consistency more than compassion. There's a belief, rarely stated but deeply ingrained, that mercy sets a dangerous precedent. That leniency invites chaos. That understanding is the enemy of order. Judge Caprio sits with that tension. He feels it from both sides. He understands the responsibility of his position, the importance of law, the necessity of rules. He knows that every decision sends a message, not just to the person in front of him, but to everyone watching. But he also knows something else. He knows that justice isn't supposed to be comfortable. The man remains standing, still, quiet, almost invisible now. If someone walked into the room at this moment without context, they might not even notice him. He has faded into the background of his own case. And that's how society often turns its back. Not with cruelty, but with distraction. Not by shouting someone down, but by deciding they are no longer worth listening to. The prosecutor finishes their request. The room waits. This is usually the moment when outcomes become predictable. When momentum carries the case toward its expected conclusion, the man braces himself, not consciously. His body does it for him. Shoulders set, breath shallow, muscles ready for disappointment. He has been here before, in different buildings with different people, but the same feeling, the feeling of being weighed and found unworthy of extra effort. Judge Caprio looks at him again, not at the charges, not at the record, at the man. He sees the exhaustion, the guarded posture, the way hope has learned to stay quiet. He sees how easily the narrative has been shaped without the man ever fully participating in it. And he understands the risk. If he challenges the direction this is heading, he risks criticism. He risks being seen as soft, emotional, out of step. If he doesn't, the system will do what it always does, move forward without looking back. This is the moment where justice often fails. Not dramatically, not loudly, but quietly, behind well-phrased arguments and procedural correctness. When appearances begin to matter more than truth. When efficiency outweighs understanding. When the question shifts from what happened to this person to how quickly can we close this case. The cameras keep rolling. Viewers at home feel something tighten in their chest. Some don't know why yet. They just sense that something important is slipping away. This isn't about one man anymore. It's about whether the system is willing to look deeper than what's convenient. Whether it can pause long enough to consider that behavior is often a symptom, not a cause. Whether justice is meant to protect society from people or protect people from being forgotten by society. Judge Caprio takes a breath. The room is still. What happens next will decide whether this courtroom reinforces the familiar pattern or breaks it. And for the first time since the proceedings began, it becomes clear. This case is no longer just about law. It's about courage. The courage to resist appearances, the courage to ask uncomfortable questions, the courage to refuse a simple ending when the truth is complicated. And everyone in the room, whether they realize it or not, is waiting to see if Judge Caprio has it. Judge Caprio finally speaks. Not suddenly, not to command attention. He doesn't raise his voice or lean forward in a way that demands silence. He waits until the room settles into its own stillness, until even the quiet shuffling of papers slows. Then, slowly and clearly, he asks a question no one else has thought to ask. How old were you when you enlisted? For a moment, the man doesn't respond, not because he didn't hear it, but because he wasn't expecting it. The question doesn't sound like an accusation. It doesn't sound like a test. It sounds like curiosity, like someone actually wants to know. He lifts his head fully now. 19, he answers. The word hangs in the air. Not because it's dramatic, not because it's shocking in itself, but because everyone understands what it means. 19 is barely grown, barely finished becoming a person. Old enough to fight, young enough to believe. Silence spreads across the courtroom, not the awkward kind, not the uncomfortable pause people rush to fill. This is a deeper silence, the kind you can hear, the kind that presses against your ears and makes you aware of your own breathing. No one moves, no one writes, no one interrupts. The man continues slowly, as if he's stepping carefully through memories that still have sharp edges. He talks about injuries, not in graphic detail, not for effect, just enough to be understood. The kind that don't always show on the outside, the kind that ache in cold weather, the kind that tighten your chest when certain sounds come too fast, too loud. He talks about friends who never came home. He doesn't list names. He doesn't need to. The way his voice shifts is enough. A slight tightening, a pause where words seem to run out. He looks down when he says it, not from shame, but from habit. It's easier to remember the dead when you're not looking at the living. He talks about coming back, not to parades, not to welcome signs, but to a country that had already moved on, a country tired of war, tired of reminders, tired of the cost. He describes it simply: planes landing, uniform folded away, a sense that whatever he'd been prepared for overseas, nothing had prepared him for returning. No therapy, no guidance, no one explaining what comes next, just closed doors, job applications unanswered, appointments scheduled months out, if at all. People telling him to adjust without offering any tools to do so. He doesn't sound angry as he speaks. That's what makes it harder to hear. Anger can be dismissed, labeled, ignored. This is something else. This is weariness, disappointment that has settled into the bones. He talks about nights when sleep doesn't come easily, about mornings when he wakes up already exhausted, about the way time stretches when you don't have a place to be, but nowhere you're allowed to stay. No one interrupts. The prosecutor stays still. The clerk doesn't look away this time. Judge Caprio listens without moving, his attention undivided. Even the cameras hesitate. They don't zoom in. They don't cut away. It's as if they, too, sense that this isn't a moment to capture aggressively. This is a moment to witness. The man pauses. You can tell he's deciding how much to say, how far to go. He's learned that there's a line people don't like you to cross, the line where your truth becomes uncomfortable for them. Then he says it once, without emphasis, without drama. I served my country. My country doesn't have a place for me. The sentence doesn't echo. It doesn't need to. It settles. You can feel it in the room. The weight of it, not as an accusation, but as a fact, something observed, something accepted. No one shifts in their seat. No one clears their throat. No one challenges him. Because there is nothing to argue with. This isn't a defense. It isn't a plea. It's a conclusion reached after years of evidence. Judge Caprio's expression changes, not visibly, not in a way the cameras can easily catch, but something in his posture softens. His shoulders drop just slightly. His hands rest flat on the bench. This is the moment everything pivots, not because of a legal argument, not because of new evidence, but because the man has finally been allowed to speak, and more importantly, to be heard. The courtroom feels different now. The earlier tension, the pressure to move on, to stay firm, loosens its grip. It doesn't disappear, but it no longer dominates. Truth has a way of doing that. It doesn't shout. It doesn't force itself forward. It waits. It waits for the right question. Judge Caprio doesn't rush to respond. He lets the silence do its work. He understands something the system often forgets. Silence after truth is not empty. It's necessary. It allows meaning to settle. This is the point where many trials go wrong, where a judge might acknowledge the story, then return to procedure as if nothing has changed. But something has changed. The man is no longer a label, no longer a case number, no longer a repeat subject. He is a 19-year-old who went to war, a man who came back carrying things he didn't know how to set down, a person who wasn't broken by choice, but by neglect. Judge Caprio looks around the room, at the prosecutor, at the clerk, at the gallery, at the cameras. He knows everyone is watching now, not just for a decision, but for what it will say about them, about the system, about what kind of justice this courtroom believes in. And he knows this. From this moment on, there is no pretending this case is simple. There is no going back to convenience, because a question has been asked and an answer has been given. And truth, once spoken, cannot be unheard. The lesson is undeniable. Truth doesn't shout. It waits to be invited. And when it finally is, it has the power to break a room open, quietly, completely, and forever. Judge Caprio turns to the prosecutor. It's not abrupt, not confrontational, just deliberate. The kind of movement that signals a shift, not in tone, but in direction. Can you honestly call him a criminal? The question is simple. No legal jargon, no raised voice, no trap hidden inside it. Just a question that asks for something rare in a courtroom. Honesty. The prosecutor looks down at the papers in front of them, then up again, then back down. Seconds pass. No one speaks. The silence stretches, not because the answer is complicated, but because it is impossible to give without contradicting everything that has just been heard. To say yes would feel wrong. To say no would undo the argument that came before. So there is no answer. And in that absence, the truth becomes clearer than any speech. Judge Caprio nods slightly, not in satisfaction, not in triumph, in understanding. If this is justice, he says calmly, it arrived too late. The words don't accuse anyone in the room directly. They don't single out the prosecutor or the system or the past, but everyone knows what he means. Justice delayed long enough can start to look like neglect. Justice that only appears after damage has been done is not a victory. It's a reminder. Caprio looks around the courtroom. He speaks now not just as a judge, but as a witness to something larger. He reminds the room that sacrifice doesn't expire, that service doesn't fade just because time passes, that wounds don't heal on a schedule set by paperwork. A courtroom, he says, cannot be blind to humanity. The sentence lands softly, but it stays, because this room has been blind before, not out of cruelty, out of habit, out of routine, out of believing that rules alone are enough. The verdict follows, clear, steady, not guilty, no flourish, no gavel slam for effect, just words spoken with certainty, not guilty. For a moment, nothing happens. The man doesn't react right away. He doesn't smile. He doesn't move. It's as if his body needs time to catch up with the sound. Then his shoulders sag, not from defeat, but from release. A tension he didn't realize he was holding finally lets go. Judge Caprio continues. This isn't the end of the matter, he makes clear. Because justice isn't just about what someone is spared from, it's about what they are given a chance to recover. The court orders medical care, not vague recommendations, real appointments, housing assistance, not a pamphlet, actual coordination, support, not temporary, intentional. The words sound different now, not abstract, not theoretical, concrete. The system, for once, is not just stepping back, it is stepping forward. Judge Caprio stands. That alone shifts the room. Judges don't often stand for defendants. He walks around the bench slowly, deliberately. He extends his hand. The man hesitates for a fraction of a second, not out of fear but disbelief. Then he takes it. Their hands meet. Caprio looks at him and says simply, a veteran of this country. No embellishment, no performance, just recognition. That's when the man breaks. He cries openly, not quietly, not apologetically. He doesn't hide his face. Years of holding it in shelters, on sidewalks, in offices where no one listened, finally spill out. No one looks away. No one is uncomfortable. This time the room stays with him. The cameras capture it, but they don't intrude. This isn't a moment for commentary. It's a moment for witnessing. The man wipes his face with the back of his hand. His breathing is uneven. His voice cracks when he tries to speak, but no words come. He doesn't need them. Everything that mattered has already been said. Judge Caprio squeezes his hand once more, then lets go. The man stands there for a moment longer. The same posture, the same clothes, but something is different. His back is still bent. Life doesn't straighten overnight. His head is higher. The gallery remains silent. No applause, no celebration, because this isn't a win in the usual sense. It's a correction. The courtroom slowly begins to empty. People gather their things. Papers are stacked. Chairs scrape softly against the floor. But something lingers. Those watching from home sit a little longer than usual. They don't switch channels right away. They feel something settling inside them. A mix of relief, sadness, and responsibility. Because this story doesn't end at the courthouse door. It follows them. It raises questions they can't easily dismiss. How many others never reach this moment? How many stand in rooms like this and are never asked the right question? How many carry proof of who they were? Folded, torn, disbelieved. The final lesson doesn't arrive as a speech. It arrives as a realization. A nation isn't measured by its strength, not by its military power, not by its economy, not by how efficiently it processes cases. A nation is measured by how it treats those it no longer needs. Those who are inconvenient, those who remind it of unfinished promises, those who served and came back changed. Judge Caprio returns to his bench. The courtroom is quieter now. Not empty, just reflective. And somewhere beyond the walls of that room, something shifts. Not the system overnight, not the world all at once, but the way people understand justice, not as a weapon, not as a machine, but as a responsibility, one that begins and sometimes is saved by remembering the purpose it was meant to serve in the first place. Hello, everyone, and thank you for staying with us until the very end here on Judge of God. If this story made you pause, if it made you uncomfortable, if it stayed with you longer than you expected, then it did what a real courtroom should do. It reminded us that justice isn't about winning or losing. It's about listening before deciding. I'd love to hear what you felt while listening. Did your opinion change along the way? Was there a moment that made you stop and think? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. If you believe stories like this deserve time, patience, and honesty, please consider subscribing to the channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next case, because every courtroom has a lesson and every verdict leaves a mark. Thank you for giving this story your attention, not just your time. This is Judge of God, and I'll see you again in the next trial.